So you're investing in the Japanese market, right? Well, there's a really good chance you're losing money on your dividends, and you might not even know it. But don't worry, there's a way to fix that, and today we're going to show you exactly how. Okay, let's say you picked a fantastic Japanese company and those sweet, sweet dividends are starting to come in. But here's the real question. How much of that money actually ends up in your pocket? The answer might really surprise you. Get ready for this. 20.42%. That's the default tax Japan just automatically takes from dividends paid to anyone who's not a resident. I mean, that's more than a fifth of your earnings just gone before you even see it. But thankfully, that is not the end of the story. So how do we get that money back? Well, here's our game plan. First, we'll break down Japan's default tax rule. Then, we'll unveil this powerful super rule that can completely change the game. We'll show you how to get way lower tax rates, but also cover the times when it won't work. Finally, we'll cover how to play by the rules and give you the single most important takeaway. All right, let's start with what I like to call the retail price on your dividend income. Think of this as the standard sticker price that's baked right into Japan's local laws. It's the starting point for literally everyone. So how do they actually take this tax? It's through something called a withholding tax. It just means the Japanese company paying you the dividend doesn't send you the full amount. They're legally required to hold back or withhold the tax part and send it straight to the Japanese government. It's an automatic deduction right from the source. And that 20.42%, it isn't just one number. It's actually made up of two parts. A 20% base tax plus a special 2.1% surtax for reconstruction. So for US investors, this combined rate is what you're going to pay. Unless, of course, you know what to do. But what if you could get a huge discount on that retail price? This, my friends, is where the treaty super rule comes in. And believe me, for US investors, this is an absolute game changer. You see, the United States and Japan have a special tax treaty. It was created for the specific purpose of helping investors just like you. The whole point is to make it easier and more profitable to invest across borders, basically by getting rid of this exact kind of tax problem. So the big question is, how much can this treaty actually save you? Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Let's look at the numbers. For most of you out there, individual US investors, the treaty slashes that 20.42% rate all the way down to just 10%. That is a massive difference. You're literally cutting your tax bill by more than half. Just like that. But it gets better. If you're a US company with a pretty big stake in a Japanese company, we're talking at least 10% of the ownership, that rate drops even lower, down to only 5%. And for the really big players, like major corporate shareholders or qualified US pension funds, you can get the withholding tax knocked out completely. Yeah, you heard me right, a tax rate of 0. So here it is, all laid out. The general rate for a US resident is 10%. If you're a US company holding at least 10% of the voting stock, you get 5%. And if you're a company with over 50% of the voting power for at least a year, or a qualified pension fund, that tax bill drops all the way down to 0. I mean, just look at that difference. It's staggering. The treaty takes you from that sky-high 20.42% domestic rate all the way down to these much, much more reasonable levels. It's just an incredibly powerful tool for any US investor in Japan. But, and this is a really big but, getting these lower rates isn't always automatic. There are some really important exceptions you have to know about, and the biggest one is called the Permanent Establishment Rule. So what in the world is a permanent establishment, or PE for short? Well, think of it as a fixed place of business in Japan. It could be a branch office, a factory, a store. You get the idea. If your US company has a real physical business footprint in Japan, the rules of the game change. And here's the test you have to apply. It's 2 parts. First, does your US company have one of these PEs in Japan? And second, are the shares that are paying you the dividend effectively connected to that PE's business? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, then your dividend gets taxed as business profit, and those nice low treaty rates we just talked about, they go out the window. Okay, besides that PE rule, there are a few other requirements you need to know about. They're basically designed to make sure people are using the treaty the way it was intended and not to, game the system. These are the anti-abuse rules. The biggest one, the most fundamental rule, is that you have to be the beneficial owner. It's a fancy term that just means you have to be the real, final person or company who gets to enjoy the money. You can't just be a middleman, an agent, or some conduit company that's set up to immediately pass the dividend along to someone else. There are also a few others to be aware of. The anti-conduit rule stops people from using a U.S. company as a simple pit stop to get a better tax rate for an investor in a third country. The arm's length principle says that related companies can't just inflate dividends to get bigger treaty benefits. And finally, the limitation on benefits rule makes sure the U.S. company is a real business, not just an empty shell company. So, all of this brings us to the most important part of our whole discussion. What do you actually have to do to lock in these lower rates and protect your investment returns? Okay, here it is. This is the single most crucial point. The lower treaty rates are not automatic. You have to be proactive. You must file a specific form. It's called the Notification for Tax Treaty Relief, and you have to file it with the Japanese tax authorities before the dividend is paid. If you don't do this, they will take the full 20.42%, no questions asked. So at the end of the day, the choice is yours. Without filing that form for treaty relief, you lose over 20% of your dividend, right off the top. But with the treaty properly applied, your tax plummets to 10, 5, or maybe even 0%. It's one simple administrative step that can make a massive difference to your bottom line. So the next time you see a dividend coming in from one of your Japanese stocks, you need to ask yourself, am I just leaving money on the table? Because as we've seen, knowing the rules and filing one simple form can make all the difference in the world. Thanks for tuning in.